The Galactic Council was in chaos. Representatives from all across the stars gathered in their massive floating citadel, the Arcara station. Today, something had happened that no one had seen coming. The most important diplomatic mission in years was now on the verge of failure. Princess Zorin, the heir to the powerful Therix Empire, was supposed to be arriving today. She was to meet with leaders of several alien races to finalize a peace treaty that would end centuries of conflict. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The peace treaty would unite dozens of star systems, bringing prosperity to thousands of worlds. The galaxy was watching. But Zorin had made one simple demand that no one could understand. She refused to travel aboard any ship other than a human one. No Therix ships, no alien vessels, only a human ship. The council chamber was filled with murmurs and confused looks. The alien representatives, some of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy, exchanged uneasy glances. The humans were still considered newcomers, young, unpredictable, and nowhere near the level of the Therix Empire in terms of power or technology. It made no sense. Why would she choose a human ship? One of the older alien delegates, a large, scaled being called Kaltor, muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. "I don't know," replied Vashera, the council's head diplomat, her antennas twitching in frustration. "We've tried every kind of diplomacy we know. The Therix insist she will not set foot on any vessel except a human one. If we don't find a solution, the treaty will fall apart." All eyes turned to Captain Marcus Steele, commander of the U.S. Titan, the pride of the human fleet. His reputation had spread across the galaxy, and even the alien leaders knew of his boldness, his uncanny ability to get out of impossible situations. The Titan was a strange ship, built with an unconventional blend of human technology, engineering, and most of all, human spirit. The ship's crew was known for their bravery, loyalty to each other, and creativity in the face of danger. But no one had expected that a mission like this, involving such delicate galactic politics, would fall on their shoulders. "Captain Steele, you're our last hope," Vashera said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "You're the only one who can make this happen. We need you to convince Princess Zorin to board your ship." Marcus Steele stood up from his seat, his dark eyes scanning the room, his face calm but determined. He'd faced down pirates, warlords, and the harshest conditions face could offer. He wasn't one to back down from a challenge. This would be different, though. He could feel it in the air. "Understood," Steele said with a slight nod. "I'll make it work." The next day, Steele and his crew boarded the U.S. Titan, preparing for the unexpected. They didn't know what awaited them, but they were used to that. Whatever the princess's reasons were, they had to respect them, or the galaxy could plunge back into war. The Therix representatives led Steele and his crew to the landing bay, where Zorin was waiting. She stood tall, her purple skin shimmering under the bright lights of the docking station. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, yet there was something else there, curiosity. As Steele approached, she glanced at him with an expression that was both regal and wary. "You must be Captain Steele," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "I've heard much about you." Steele straightened his posture, trying not to be intimidated. "Princess Zorin, it's an honor," he said, bowing his head slightly. "I hear your ship is different from the others," she said, her gaze lingering on him. "I hope that's true. I've grown tired of the same old ships, the same old ways. I want to see something new." "We'll do our best to make your journey as comfortable as possible," Steele replied, trying to understand her. "But if you don't mind me asking, why only a human ship?" Zorin smiled a little, but there was no warmth in it. "Because humans are unpredictable," she said, her voice carrying a hint of admiration. "You don't follow the rules, and you think in ways no one else does. Your creativity, your ability to adapt to anything, that's what I need." Steele felt a mix of pride and confusion. He hadn't expected such high praise from a princess of an empire that had ruled for thousands of years. It was strange, yet intriguing. "We'll get you to your destination, Princess," Steele said, more confident now. "You can trust us." Zorin stepped onto the Titan, her eyes scanning the ship with curiosity. As she walked past the crew, she seemed to study them, each one a symbol of the human spirit she admired. The Titan may have been a ship built for war, but its heart beat with the relentless drive of humanity itself. The journey was about to begin, and whether the galaxy was ready for it or not, it was going to change everything. The U.S. Titan was ready for its most unusual mission yet. Captain Marcus Steele stood at the helm, watching the stars streak past as the ship made its way to Theric space. Beside him, his first officer, Lieutenant Juno Rios, studied the readings on her console. "Everything checks out, Captain," Rios said. "The ship's systems are fully operational. Crew is prepped, but this mission is unlike any other." Steele nodded, his expression serious. "I know, Juno. The princess is a strange one. But if we can keep her calm and get this treaty signed, we're doing something good for the galaxy. Let's just hope she's as fascinated by our ship as she says she is." The message from the Galactic Council had been clear. Princess Zorin would only board the U.S. Titan for her tour. No other ship, no matter how advanced, would do. And, like it or not, Steele and his crew were her only hope for peace. They had to prove that humanity wasn't just a young race. They were capable of changing the galaxy. As the Titan made its approach to the Theric's capital, a huge, gleaming city planet named Nyros, Steele prepared for what could be the most important meeting of his life. The city was a marvel of ancient technology, filled with towering spires and floating platforms that seemed to defy physics. It looked like something out of a history book, all precision and grandeur. Steele couldn't help but feel small in the shadow of its impossible beauty. Moments later, the ship docked at the royal landing platform. Zorin was waiting there, flanked by her royal guards. She was tall and regal, her purple skin glowing under the station's lights. But it wasn't just her appearance that was striking. It was the energy she gave off, a mix of curiosity, intellect, and a sense of power that only someone of her status could have. "Captain Steele." She greeted him with a slight nod, her eyes scanning him with a look that could either be admiration or challenge. "I trust your ship is as unique as they say." "It's all we have," Steele said, offering a smile, though he knew she was testing him. "The U.S. Titan isn't like any other ship. We do things our way. Let's just say it's a bit more flexible than most." Zorin raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Flexible. Interesting." With a small gesture, Zorin motioned for Steele to follow her. As they walked through the docking bay, the crew members stood at attention, but Zorin didn't seem to notice them. Her eyes were locked on the ship, its sleek design, its sharp lines, and the human technology that made it possible. Everything about the Titan was different from the giant, majestic ships of the Theric's empire, but it was clear Zorin liked what she saw. "So, Captain, tell me about your ship," she said, her voice cool and measured. "How did you come to build something like this? What makes it so different from the others?" Steele hesitated. He had been trained to give briefings and speeches, but this felt personal. "The Titan's been designed for everything. It's built to adapt to any situation: combat, diplomacy, exploration. But it's the crew that makes it different. Humans don't back down from a challenge. We don't give up. We find ways to do what others think is impossible." Zorin seemed impressed. "So it's not just the ship, it's the people who make it special." "Exactly," Steele agreed, feeling a sense of pride. "The ship is just a reflection of humanity. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that humans are always evolving, always improving." Zorin studied him closely, her eyes narrowing. "Tell me more about these humans. I've seen your people, of course, fighting in the war against the Kaldari, pushing through hostile environments, building cities on barren planets. But I want to know what drives you. Survival, Steele said. And hope. We're a young species, but we've learned to fight for a future. For each other. We can survive anything if we stand together. Zorin paused, her expression thoughtful. Survival. And hope. She repeated the words softly. Yes, perhaps that's why I came here. To see what you're made of. Maybe you truly can offer something my people need. Steele wasn't sure if she was testing him or speaking honestly, but he nodded. We'll show you what we can do, Princess. But this isn't just about our ship. It's about what we can build together. A future where all of us, humans and Therics alike, can coexist. She nodded slowly, her gaze shifting back to the Titan. I'm curious to see if you can live up to your promises, Captain Steele. But one thing is clear, you're not like the others. And for that, I'm willing to give you a chance. With that, Zorin boarded the Titan. As she walked through the corridors, Steele watched her closely. She seemed different now, not just a royal princess with demands, but someone who was genuinely interested in what humanity had to offer. The crew members, watching her, whispered among themselves. This was their chance, not just to prove humanity's worth, but to prove that they could shape the galaxy's future. As the Titan's engines hummed to life, Steele couldn't help but feel a strange sense of excitement. This mission wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about showing the galaxy what humanity was capable of, something that would never be forgotten. The U.S. Titan cruised through the stars, its sleek hull cutting through space with ease. Inside, life continued as usual, but there was an undercurrent of tension among the crew. They had a royal passenger now, a princess of one of the oldest and most powerful empires in the galaxy. Princess Zorin had settled into her quarters, but the crew was still trying to figure her out. Was she truly here to help bring peace, or did she have her own agenda? Captain Marcus Steele stood on the bridge, watching the stars pass by. He had gotten used to the thrill of deep space missions, but this felt different. Having Zorin aboard wasn't just a diplomatic task, it was a test. The future of the galaxy could depend on how well they handled this mission. Lieutenant Rios, his trusted first officer, stood beside him, studying her console. Captain, she said, her voice calm. I've been keeping track of our course and the princess's interests. She's been asking a lot about the crew, about what makes us different from the other races she's met. Steele nodded. She's curious. But there's something more. She's testing us, seeing if humanity really is capable of what we say we are. Let's just hope we don't disappoint her. Meanwhile, Princess Zorin spent her time wandering the ship. She'd already visited the engine room, the mess hall, and even the observation deck. She had an air of quiet authority, but there was a visible curiosity in her eyes as she moved through the corridors. It wasn't just the ship's technology that fascinated her, it was the people. How they worked together, how they communicated, how they survived in such hostile environments. She had seen civilizations far older than humanity, but none quite like this. One evening, Steele invited Zorin to join him in the Titan's briefing room. The crew was gathered for a meeting, discussing the upcoming stop at an important neutral world where they would meet with several alien leaders. Steele figured this would be a good opportunity to show Zorin how humanity handled delicate situations. It wasn't just about diplomacy, it was about showing her the heart of what made humans tick. As Zorin entered, the room fell silent. The crew members stood at attention, but Steele motioned for them to sit. He greeted Zorin with a nod, and she took a seat at the head of the table, opposite him. The room was filled with human faces, and for the first time, Zorin seemed to truly look at each of them. She didn't just see soldiers or diplomats, she saw individuals. Steele cleared his throat and began. We're heading to Zaloran, a neutral world that's been the site of tense peace talks in the past. This meeting could decide whether the treaty goes forward or falls apart. I'll need everyone on their toes. Zorin leaned forward, her eyes studying the crew. And how will you handle it? What makes your people capable of keeping the peace when so many others fail? Steele smiled slightly. We don't give up. We keep trying, even when things seem impossible. Humans are persistent. We don't back down from a challenge. And when things go wrong, we adapt. We find a way. Zoran's eyes glinted with interest. Adapt. That's what makes you different, isn't it? You're not bound by tradition or ancient rules. You make your own path. One of the crew members, Lieutenant Sarah Dunn, spoke up. We're not perfect, Princess, but we've learned that no matter the obstacle, we find a way to work together. Zoran studied her for a moment. Together, she repeated softly. Yes, that's something I haven't seen in many of the species I've met. Unity, even when faced with impossible odds. The conversation shifted to the specifics of the mission, but Zoran's mind was elsewhere. She kept glancing around the room, observing the way the humans interacted. She noticed how they disagreed with each other, but still found ways to cooperate. She noticed how they laughed, how they joked, how they weren't afraid to show their emotions. There was something raw and real about them, something her people had lost long ago. Later that evening, as Steele walked through the corridors, he spotted Zoran standing by a window, gazing out into the stars. He approached her quietly, not wanting to disturb her, but she turned to face him before he could speak. "Captain Steele," she said, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how humans adapt, how you never give up. Your people, they are different, not like the others." Steele didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure how to respond to the compliment. Instead, he said, "We've had to learn to be. Our history hasn't been easy, Princess. We've had to fight for everything." "I see that now," Zoran said. "Your race, it's not the strongest. It's not the most advanced. But you have something that no one else has, a will to survive, no matter what." Steele nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of pride and something deeper. "Maybe that's what makes us human." Zoran turned back to the stars, her expression unreadable. "Maybe. But that's why I'm here. To see if humanity can truly leave the galaxy, to see if you have what it takes." Steele looked out the window beside her. "We'll show you. We'll prove it." The U.S. Titan moved through the quiet of deep space as it neared the neutral world of Zaloran. The ship's crew went about their usual routines, but a sense of unease filled the air. In less than a day, they would be landing on a planet full of political tensions, and their mission would hinge on the success of a treaty that could either bring peace to the galaxy or send it spiraling into war. Captain Marcus Steele stood on the bridge, staring at the large display showing Zaloran's planetary surface. The planet's atmosphere shimmered in the distance, the clouds thick with moisture. Steele could almost feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This wasn't just another diplomatic mission. It was the moment that would define humanity's role in the galaxy. Beside him, Lieutenant Juno Rios scanned her console, her expression focused. "Captain, the representatives from the other factions are already gathering on the planet's surface. The atmosphere is tense. The Therics will be arriving soon." Steele nodded. "We knew this wasn't going to be easy. Prepare for the unexpected, Juno. We may need to think on our feet." Meanwhile, Princess Zoran was in her quarters, reviewing the treaty documents. She had spent the last few days asking questions, learning about human diplomacy, and trying to understand why humans, despite their young age as a species, had become such an important part of the galaxy's balance of power. She had seen how they worked together, how they faced challenges with a fierce determination. But this meeting would be different. She knew the stakes were higher than ever before. As Steele entered her quarters, Zoran looked up from the documents. Her eyes were sharp, but there was a hint of uncertainty behind them, something that Steele hadn't seen before. "Captain," she said, standing up, "I've been thinking a lot about our mission. The treaty is more fragile than I realized." Steele took a step forward, folding his arms. "We're all aware of that, Princess, but you're the one who insisted on bringing the treaty to Zaloran. Why now?" Zoran looked out the window at the distant planet. "My people, we have always valued strength. The Therics Empire has ruled the galaxy for centuries, But I fear we've become complacent. We need something more than power to survive. We need hope. The humans, your people, they understand that. They've been through wars, loss, and hardship, but they never give up. Steele nodded, his voice softening. We don't back down from a challenge. It's who we are. Zorin turned back to him. I didn't come here to just sign a treaty, Captain. I came here because I believe the galaxy needs something new. A new kind of leadership, perhaps. A leadership that doesn't come from power alone. Steele's gaze lingered on her, realizing that she wasn't just looking for a political alliance. She was looking for something bigger, something that humanity could offer. He understood then that this mission wasn't just about the Therix Empire or the treaty. It was about shaping the future. I'll do everything I can to make that happen, Princess, Steele said, his voice resolute. But we're in this together now. We all have to be on the same page if we're going to succeed. The next day, the Titan touched down on Zalarin's surface. The planet was beautiful, its cities built into the side of mountains, with waterfalls cascading down into deep valleys. But the beauty couldn't hide the tension in the air. A large assembly of alien leaders had already gathered in the main hall, waiting for the final negotiations. Steele, Zorin, and the rest of the crew made their way to the negotiation chamber, where the representatives of the various factions were waiting. The room was vast, filled with alien diplomats, each one representing a different star system. The atmosphere was thick with suspicion. It was clear that none of these factions trusted each other, and the arrival of the humans and the Therix only added to the tension. As they entered, Steele could feel the eyes of everyone on them. Zorin walked beside him, her posture straight and her expression unreadable. She had spent years in the courts of the Therix Empire, but this was different. This was not her world. It was a world of uncertainty, of fragile alliances that could break at any moment. The meeting began with the usual formalities, but Steele could tell that the representatives were all waiting for something. An opening, a moment when the talks could go sideways. The Therix delegate, a stern man named High Lord Varen, stood up and spoke first. The Therix Empire demands nothing less than complete control over the military defense of the treaty's signatories. We will ensure that peace is kept, by force, if necessary. Steele's eyes narrowed. He had expected nothing less from the Therix, but he knew they couldn't let that stand. If the Therix took control of the military defense, it would put all the smaller factions at their mercy. Princess Zorin stood up, her voice clear and calm, but carrying an authority that commanded the room's attention. The Therix will not impose their will on the galaxy any longer, she said. We are here to create an alliance, not a dictatorship. I am not here to rule, nor is anyone else. We will all stand together, or this treaty will fail. The room went silent. Steele watched as the delegates exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. This was the moment. Zorin had made her move. The room was silent after Princess Zorin's bold declaration. All eyes were on her, the powerful princess of the Therix Empire, who had just challenged the very system of control her people had fought so hard to maintain. The other alien delegates shifted in their seats, some with disbelief, others with growing suspicion. Steele could feel the tension rising. This wasn't just a treaty anymore. It was a battle for control. High Lord Varen, the Therix delegate, glared at Zorin. His cold, reptilian eyes bore into her, and his voice, when it came, was like ice. Princess Zorin, you would defy your own empire for this. Do you think these weak, primitive species will stand by you? Zorin remained standing, her posture regal, unyielding. I am not defying my empire, High Lord, she said calmly. I am offering a new path, one where all species have a say, not just the powerful. If the Therix Empire is to lead, it must lead through strength of character, not domination. Steele watched the exchange carefully, sensing the fragility of the moment. If Zorin's challenge to the Therix Empire failed, the entire treaty would fall apart. and the consequences could be disastrous. But if she succeeded, it would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Humanity's role in this new world was more important than ever. The room buzzed with murmurs. Some of the delegates seemed moved by Zoran's words, while others remained skeptical. Steele knew this was the critical moment. He needed to act fast to ensure the peace talks didn't collapse under the weight of distrust. He stood up, his voice cutting through the noise. The U.S. Titan represents the will of humanity. We have come here not to dominate, but to unite. To show that even the smallest of species can contribute to the greater good of the galaxy. We may not have centuries of history, but we have something that others don't. The ability to adapt and work together. There was a pause. Steele glanced at Zoran, who gave him a subtle nod. He wasn't sure if she believed in this as much as he did, but she was playing her part. Captain Steele speaks the truth, Zoran added, her voice steady. Humans understand what it means to fight for survival. We've faced wars, famine, and destruction, but we keep going, and we do it together. A delegate from the Areshi Confederacy, a species known for their telepathic abilities, spoke up. You speak of unity, but unity cannot be built on lies. What will you offer us, humans? Why should we trust you? Steele met the Areshi delegate's piercing gaze. We've seen the worst of ourselves, he said. We've made mistakes, but we've learned from them. We don't claim to have all the answers, but we're willing to work for them. For peace. For the future. Zoran added, we are offering you more than just words. We are offering you a chance to build something better. Something none of us can do alone. For a moment, the room fell silent again. The delegates seemed to be weighing their options, considering what had been said. Steele could feel the weight of history in the air. One wrong word, one wrong move, and everything could unravel. Finally, High Lord Varen spoke, his voice still cold but less hostile. Perhaps there is some merit in what you say. But words are not enough. We need action. We need guarantees. Zoran's eyes flashed with a sharp intelligence. You want action, High Lord. You'll get it. I propose that humanity take part in the enforcement of this treaty, not as subordinates, but as equals. Let us prove that our methods can work just as well as yours. Varen's expression softened slightly. He seemed to be considering her words, but Steele knew better than to trust his appearance. The Therics were not easy to sway. They had built their empire on force, and they didn't like the idea of sharing power. But Zoran wasn't finished. I will also offer a symbol of our commitment to this alliance. She turned to Steele. Captain, if you would. Steele stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. He nodded to one of the crew members, who placed a small device in his hand. It was a human-made emblem of peace, an ancient symbol, a simple circle with an olive branch inside it. The symbol had been used for centuries, even on Earth, to signify the desire for peace. Zoran took the device from Steele's hand and held it up. This is the symbol of our commitment to peace. Humanity stands with all of you, ready to help secure a better future for all. The room was quiet as Zoran held the emblem up for everyone to see. For the first time, Steele saw a flicker of respect in High Lord Varen's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maybe, just maybe, Zoran's challenge was starting to make an impact. A few tense moments passed, and then the first murmurs of agreement started. Slowly, one by one, the delegates began to nod, some tentatively, others more confidently. The Therics were still wary, but it seemed that Zoran's words, combined with humanity's offer of peace, had struck a chord. The treaty wasn't signed yet, but something had changed. Steele felt a spark of hope. Maybe humanity could truly make a difference. As the meeting drew to a close, Zoran turned to Steele. It's not over yet, but we're getting closer. Steele nodded. We'll get there. Together. The negotiations had taken a sudden turn. What was supposed to be a diplomatic exchange had turned into something far more intense. The delegates, though they had nodded in agreement, were far from ready to sign the treaty. The room was still tense as the hours dragged on, and Steele could feel the weight of the moment growing heavier with each passing minute. Princess Zorin stood at the front, her gaze unwavering. Her bold declaration had not been forgotten, but it had also not been fully accepted. The Therix delegation, led by High Lord Varen, was clearly holding back. They wanted more than words. They wanted proof, action, and guarantees. The room's atmosphere was thick with distrust and suspicion, especially among the smaller factions that had come here in hopes of securing peace, but now feared being swept aside by larger powers. Steele, standing beside Zorin, kept his composure. His mind raced, trying to figure out what the next move would be. He knew the Therix wouldn't agree to anything less than complete control over the defense of the treaty. That was their nature. But humanity could not let that happen. It would undermine everything they had worked for. The Areshi delegate, who had spoken earlier, now stood up again. This treaty is flawed. Your human idea of peace is naive. There is no way we can trust the Therix to uphold their promises without more oversight. Steele turned toward Zorin, his eyes meeting hers. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. She had come to speak for herself and for humanity, but this was no longer just about diplomacy. It was about survival. She stepped forward. "I understand your concern," she said, her voice calm but carrying authority. "But the Therix are not the only ones capable of defending this treaty. Humans can and will offer their assistance, but we will not be controlled. This is not a matter of trust, but a matter of strength and unity." Her words rang out, and for a moment the room went silent. Steele saw that Zorin's challenge had cut through the tension, but it had also caused a rift. The smaller factions seemed to nod in agreement, but the Therix delegation remained unmoved, their faces stoic. Then, to Steele's surprise, High Lord Varen stood up. "You speak of unity, Princess, but unity without strength is weakness. You want to prove yourselves. Show us you can protect this alliance when the time comes. Only then will we sign this treaty." A murmur ran through the room. Steele's heart sank. It was exactly what he had feared. The Therix would not settle for anything less than full control over the military aspect of the alliance. Zorin's face hardened. "We will not bend to your demands, Varen. If you cannot accept equality, then there is no treaty." The atmosphere in the room shifted. The smaller factions, which had remained mostly silent until now, began to exchange nervous glances. They were caught between the threat of the Therix and the promises of the humans. One by one, they began to speak up. "The humans are right," a delegate from the Galduin Federation said. "If we are to trust anyone, it should be each other, not just one powerful species." "We came here for peace," added a representative from the Karen Dominion, "not for domination." Steele felt a surge of hope. Maybe the tide was turning in their favor after all. But just as the mood seemed to shift, another voice echoed from the back of the room. "I do not trust the humans," said a delegate from the Rythu Alliance, a fierce and warlike species. "They have no place in these negotiations. They will destroy everything we have worked for." The room fell silent again. Steele's heart pounded. The Rythu were notorious for their unpredictable actions, and their words carried weight. Zorin looked around the room. "You fear what you don't understand," she said. "But I assure you, humanity is not a threat. We are here because we believe in the future. Not just our future, but all of ours." For a brief moment, it seemed like the room was ready to explode. The smaller factions were torn between their fear of the Therix and their distrust of humanity. Steele could see the lines being drawn. This wasn't just a negotiation anymore. It was a battle for control, and they were running out of time. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the room. The doors to the chamber slammed open, and in walked a figure who none of them had expected to see. It was General Virok, a former leader of the Therix Empire who had long been exiled for his views on peace. His arrival caused an uproar among the Therix delegation. Varen looked furious, But Virak held his ground. "I have been listening to your petty arguments long enough," Virak said, his deep voice cutting through the chaos. "This treaty will never work if we allow the same old divisions to rule us. It is time to choose a new path, one that does not rely on military force, but on the strength of unity." For the first time since the meeting began, Steele felt a glimmer of hope. This unexpected arrival could be the game changer they needed. Virak's voice held the authority of someone who had lived through the worst of the galaxy's wars and survived. If anyone could sway the Therics, it was him. Steele turned to Zoran, his expression serious. "This could be it, the breakthrough we've been waiting for." Zoran met his gaze, her eyes full of determination. "It's not over yet, Captain, but we may finally have a chance." The tension in the room was palpable. The sudden arrival of General Virak had turned the atmosphere upside down. The Therics delegates, once calm and composed, were now on edge. High Lord Varen, his face a mask of anger, turned toward the old general with disbelief. "You have no place here, Virak," Varen snapped, his voice full of contempt. "You were exiled for a reason." Virak stood tall, unshaken by the harsh words. His once proud uniform, now faded and worn, carried the weight of years of conflict, but his eyes held a calm confidence. "I have no place in your empire, Varen," he said coolly. "But I have a place here. In this room. In this galaxy." The other delegates, who had been hesitant and uncertain, now turned their attention to Virak. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the ship's engines in the distance. Steele could feel the shift. The power in the room had changed. Virak's presence was more than just a statement. It was a challenge to everything the Therics had represented. Zoran stood by Steele, her eyes locked on the general. There was no doubt in her mind now. Virak had come not just to speak, but to act. And he might be their best chance to secure a treaty that truly brought peace. "General," Zoran said, her voice steady, "you've been exiled for your beliefs. Why return now?" Virak's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Zoran. "Because you're right, Princess. The galaxy can't survive on the old ways. The Therics Empire is a relic of the past. If we don't change, we will destroy ourselves." He turned to face the delegates, his voice growing stronger. "I've seen it with my own eyes. The wars, the betrayal, the destruction. The Therics thought they could control everything through fear. But fear doesn't keep the galaxy united. It divides it." Varen stepped forward, clearly furious. "You speak of peace, but you are a traitor. You've abandoned your people." Virak didn't flinch. "I never abandoned my people. I abandoned the false idea that peace could only be built on the backs of the weak. The Therics need to lead differently, or they will lead no more." There was a long silence as the delegates digested Virak's words. Steele felt a shift in the room. The smaller factions, the ones that had hesitated to align themselves with the Therics, seemed to lean forward, listening more intently now. They could feel the weight of history, and for the first time, they saw a chance to break free from the cycles of war. Zoran's voice broke the silence. "We need change, yes, but we also need action. The Therics can't just promise peace. They must prove it." Virak nodded. "I agree, and I can help make that happen." He turned back to Varen. "If you truly care about your people, Varen, you'll stop clinging to the old ways. Humanity has shown that strength doesn't come from domination. It comes from unity." Varen's expression faltered, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. Steele knew this was the moment they had all been waiting for. The Therics Empire had always ruled through fear, but now, with Virak's return, they were being offered a new path. A path of unity, of strength through cooperation. The room was still, every eye on the Therics leaders. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Varen spoke, his voice low and reluctant. I cannot deny the truth in your words, Virak. But this is not an easy change." Zoran stepped forward, her voice firm. There will be no change unless you make it, Varen. The galaxy will not wait for your empire to decide when it is ready. We are ready now. The question is, will you join us? Varen hesitated, his gaze flickering from Zoran to Virok, and then to the other delegates. It was clear he was torn. The old ways had served the Therics for centuries, but now, that power was slipping through their fingers. Finally, Varen turned to the delegates. If we agree to this treaty, it must be on equal terms. The Therics will relinquish control over military enforcement. All species will contribute to the defense, and all species will have an equal say in the future of this galaxy. A murmur of surprise spread through the room. Steele could hardly believe it. The Therics, once the unchallenged rulers, were finally willing to share power. Zoran's face softened slightly, but there was no hesitation in her voice. We agree. Together, we will secure a future for all of us. With that, the treaty was signed. Steele stood beside Zoran as the delegates shook hands, a sense of relief washing over him. The tension that had plagued the room for days was finally gone. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had played a key role in creating a new path for the galaxy. But as Steele watched the various species interact, a thought lingered in his mind. This treaty was only the beginning. The real work would begin now, building the trust, the cooperation, and the unity that would ensure the peace they had promised. We did it, Zoran said quietly, her voice filled with both pride and weariness. Steele nodded, his gaze still on the room full of diplomats. We did, but the hard part's just starting. And with that, they stepped into the future, together.